All right, and welcome back to episode 21 of Who's on Top. I'm your host, Ori. This week, we're going to be talking about couples. No, we're not talking about our most sought-after bachelor, Jeremy Giles, but rather dynamic duos across sports. But before we can introduce these prodigious pairs, let's introduce our analysts. All right, after his first and second place games in diplomacy, beating Ellis both times, we got the first bro, Jacob Casson.
What's up, guys? I did beat Ellis both times, and Alex as well.
That's BS. He won. Okay, no.
I won. You're right.
The most sought-after bachelor of all time, the perpetual number 2 to our dynamic duos. We got Jeremy Giles.
At your service. I would also like to point out I beat Jacob that first game where he got second and carried him in the next game. Therefore,
what? You did not carry me in the next game.
All right, and moving on, we got our loser.
Okay, buddy.
2 stars away from winning the diplomacy game, but quote-unquote
Forfeit.
getting bored. We got Ellis Gordon, the Russian machine.
The forfeiter.
Everyone, I was bored because I wasn't playing up to my skill level, but it's okay. We need to give the plebes a little win.
That's true. He was playing like at a 10-year-old level instead of an 11-year-old level.
And I'm your host, Ori. I have 3.25 wins, most of all time in terms of online diplomacy. Yes, that doesn't mean as much as real diplomacy, but it still means something. So let's get to our duos. Jacob, you want to start us off with some?
All right, so one of my most favorite duos to watch, they're new this year and last year. It's got to be Anthony Davis and the King, LeBron James,
Great
out
pair,
there in
Twin
LA
Towers.
with the Lakers. They're just always so dominant. They complement each other so well, and I think they're one of the most, if not the most dominant duos in basketball currently, and have the potential to be one of the greatest in history if LeBron can stick in the league for the next couple years.
They are the most dominant duo. In
Yeah, I
basketball.
mean,
period.
LeBron's passing ability is just utterly complemented by Anthony Davis's imperious stature around the rim. It's just great to see all the time. And I think they really have a future.
I guess
kind of like, Tom Brady and his children, that dynamic is really strong. And I think we can start moving on. Anything else to say about it?
I think I'd actually have one question about this.
Sure,
obviously, LeBron is a top 2 player all time, and Anthony Davis is also in his own right, very much a star. But how do you think LeBron and Anthony Davis compares to their past duos, right? Like LeBron and Kyrie, for example.
Well, I mean, I think LeBron's never had a kind of center he can consistently rely on to the same capacity
Shaq.
for Anthony Davis. What?
Shaq.
Well,
Yeah.
He never played with Shaq.
No, he did.
He did for like a year or two.
He did.
But Shaq was old.
Yeah, but that's my point. You have 2 players. Well, LeBron's a little bit past his prime, some might argue, but he's definitely in his passing prime. Anthony Davis is in his strength prime. And I don't think he's really had someone to play. Chris Bosh maybe a little bit, but not to the same capacity, and he was more of a power forward anyway. Not exactly like a straightforward center like Anthony Davis. And I mean, that Lakers Showtime offense, they have so many big players like Anthony Davis, JaVale McGee, LeBron James. It's wonderful to see. Yeah, Alice, what's up?
I will say though that while physically LeBron James is definitely past his prime, I think intellectually, like IQ wise, he's like in his prime currently. So I still think he's the second best player in the NBA currently. So he's still in his prime.
Behind
Yeah.
Giannis.
Who's the second best?
Who's
LeBron, and first is Giannis at the moment.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
But that's my point. The league's kind of like seen more of a shift towards, we've been talking so much about small ball, but the best players consistently are large players,
Yeah.
I mean, Anthony Davis, kind of Nikola Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns, it's the shooting bigs that have kind of taken over the league.
KD.
Anthony Davis can
Julius
definitely
Randle.
shoot as well. Yeah, well, I wouldn't exactly put that. But do you guys want to talk about this any further? Any other comments?
I have another basketball duo that some say are kind of close to LeBron's and Davis's talent. Can I introduce it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, it's actually the other LA team, the Clippers, that is, with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. They're a less traditional duo, like a smaller duo, a shooting guard, small forward, or 2 small forwards, but they're both amazing defenders and they're both flashy. PG has the shot, Kawhi has the inside game, and the clutch factor. He's also one of the best defenders in the league. They complement each other very well, and the Clippers, just like the Lakers, are one of the most dominant teams in the league right now.
And I think I kind of agree with that. And I also think as a duo, I wouldn't be shocked if Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, just because they have better chemistry, could beat Anthony Davis and LeBron James.
I mean,
in a matchup.
Again, in a 2-on-2, I think it's not
very hard to tell.
I mean, like assuming there's other players, like assuming those are the stars.
Assuming a 5-on-5, it's a very different skill set, though.
I think duos.
What? No, because I mean, Kawhi and Paul George are the best. Well, two of the best, like exterior defenders, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
LeBron's defense has really started lagging over the past few years. Putting more like conservative efforts to try to mitigate on offense more. And then we got Anthony Davis, still a great rim protector, could use some more footwork, especially on the outside. But I mean, it's just a very different skill set. So it's hard to compare, but
I think honestly on a 2-on-2,
I mean, it's not close, Ellis. On a 2-on-2, the size.
LeBron and Davis would win so easily.
Well, I so disagree with you guys.
Really?
I think on a 5-on-5, I'm going Bron and Davis all the way. But on 2v2, I think Kawhi and Paul George, and here's why. I think, it's really predicated on the fact that in history, only one player has been able to lock up LeBron James, and that's Kawhi Leonard. And I think Paul George can handle Anthony Davis.
I disagree with that. Davis is so much bigger.
I don't think. Yeah, I think it's very hard. But this is why we're not talking about it 2-on-2 because it's so hard to compare.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't really stack up in that way. But I think that in a 5-on-5, the conversation becomes a lot more even. But the size of Davis and James and the strength. I know Kawhi is great, but I don't think anyone can handle Davis one-on-one really.
I actually really kind of agree with Ori, and even LeBron James with no like breaks or shifting off. I mean, if you look at their heights, I can't believe I'm saying that Kawhi at 6'7" and Paul George at 6'8" are short, but for the NBA, they are not the biggest players, despite for every single other person in the world.
Well, I don't know.
They are giants.
Kawhi.
There's supersized wings, but like again, it's a center and small forward that can play center.
But Kawhi's locked up LeBron in the past.
Right, if you pair LeBron with Davis, I just don't see it happening. But then you think
Paul George can guard Anthony Davis?
More than Anthony Davis can guard Paul George.
I don't. I
see the point there, but I guess it would be very hard on defense for both.
It's
of them.
It's
honestly, go ahead, Jeremy.
It's just I think Paul George would have to make almost every shot, right? Because I just don't see how Paul George would to stop a center like Anthony Davis from getting to the rim. So it would put a lot of pressure on Paul George and Kawhi Leonard to have to make almost all their shots, while LeBron James and Anthony Davis would be able to miss a few shots.
Yeah, but I think, like, as we've already said, if we're talking about 2-on-2, that's really hard to tell because you don't know. But I think comparing them on 2-on-2 is not the best way to compare them because that's not how you play basketball.
Yeah,
I agree.
All right, guys, ready to move to our other basketball duo?
Yeah, let's do it.
Russell Westbrook and James Harden, both individually great players. What do you guys think of him as a team?
I think as a team, they play very well together. I believe they're a great complement to each other. Westbrook is more of the attacking type. He pushes towards the basket, potentially gets double teamed in the paint. Harden's just chilling out there by the 3-point line, and you know what he does. He's money. That triple hop step. I don't even know what it is. I don't know how he does it, but he's so amazing with that shot. He's so consistent. Westbrook's a great passer. We all know he averaged a triple-double 2 years in a row, or close to, I think. And Harden somehow always gets to the line, like 30 points a game consistently. Go ahead, Ellis.
But see, something I have to make a distinction is Jacob keeps on explaining how individually these players are really good. Westbrook gets to the rim a lot, really good, hard-working player. Harden obviously is the
I think the point that you're getting at is they're both ball handler types, right?
Yeah, they don't complement each other like LeBron and Anthony Davis. Yeah. On top of that, and of course, when you have two amazing players, you're going to be a good team. But if the Rockets this year, for example, in the playoffs, get to the conference semifinals, so the final 8, and they have to go up against the Clippers or Lakers, I don't see them standing a chance just because two really good players with chemistry
and strong players too.
I think you can there's a clear distinction, and I think we should define what exactly a dynamic duo entails. Is it two people on the same time at the same court in the same play,
or two teammates?
Two people, or is it two teammates? I think it's super important to define how they complement each other, because you can see a clear complementary basis between Anthony Davis and LeBron James with their link-ups and alley-oops. Yeah. But it might be more of a subtle difference, like Westbrook driving and drawing the defense so he can kick it out to Harden. So that's a little bit less in your face, but it might be a subtle kind of way to measure that kind of dynamicism?
I mean, I guess to me, a dynamic duo, what it would take, and I guess I would say this, and I would say one thing about Harden and Westbrook is that a dynamic duo means that something one player does specifically helps the other, and not just like because they're on the same team, right? Like it can't be like a defensive play that then helps an offensive play. But right, yeah, as you said, like if you go forward or if someone attacks the rim, which will then draw more defenders there, which will leave someone open on the outside. Because of that, that specifically helps the other player, which to me is what makes it a dynamic duo.
And
it's
I
not
agree
just
that
on the same team.
I agree that I'm not arguing that Westbrook and Harden aren't a dynamic duo. I just think they're less dynamic, I guess, than the two previously listed.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah,
as in they would lose the game against the two. They're definitely a dynamic duo. They're just not.
Well,
I don't think they're nearly as good as LeBron and.
Where do you think they stack up on the scale with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard? Because
I think
what kind of complementary plays have we seen from them?
They just complement each other better. They're both, first off, they're both really good defenders, and Paul George he can play a little bit off ball. Like everyone's saying, this is, and so can Kawhi. Like I don't know, the Kawhi and Paul George they can have the ball in their hand.
I think the point you're trying to make is Kawhi Leonard and Paul George might not have the same kind of synergy, but they don't get in each other's way.
Yeah, look at this.
Paul George, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden both need the ball and might get in each other's way that way.
Yeah.
Look at this. Look at these stats for usage rate, which tells you how much a team uses a player in their offensive system.
Also, Ellis, before you do that, one thing that George and Kawhi do is they don't play like a lot of minutes together like most two superstars do.
Yeah, they stagger.
They spend a lot of time off the court when the other one's on, but it works very well for them.
I kind of think there's a few things about that. I think one, they've done that partly because obviously we've heard a lot about Kawhi and taking breaks during the season, right? Taking games off.
Not this season.
No, this season as well. Not to the same extent as last season.
Yeah, the beginning of the season.
My point is only that I think part of the reason in the beginning of the season they weren't on the same court a lot is because they didn't need both of them on the court, right? So if they needed them, I'm guessing they would have them on the court more. With that said, I think a duo like that's better than Harden and Westbrook, partly because of the playoffs, right? The whole thing, I know Westbrook is known often for breaking down in the playoffs to an extent. And Harden doesn't always do as well with the playoffs physical play. So my fear with that duo more is that you're pairing two players that historically have not done well in the playoffs together and expecting that to go well, which I don't
also look at usage rate. And I know there's stats this year that Westbrook right now is the 9th most used player and Harden's the 1st. But to get the max out of each player, you need to use them a lot, in my opinion. And the season before they teamed up, Harden's usage rate was 36.3%, and Westbrook's was 34.1%. Coincidentally, both those two were the 1 and 2 in the NBA highest used for their teams, and Embiid clocking in at 3.
Yeah,
and that both of those were their best seasons, or Westbrook's best season was the year before that, but was their prime seasons, and they're used a lot. So Westbrook can still be really good, but teaming up with Harden is not getting the best out of him. I mean, he's an amazing player. He's still going to be really good, but it's not the best.
But I almost would argue the opposite, right? Because he's being used less. But I believe oftentimes when a player has a lot of usage, right, it's because they have to rely on that player. It isn't necessarily that that's better. It's the same thing in football, right, where if you throw a receiver a ball 12 times, it doesn't necessarily mean the player's playing better. It means they need him more. So I don't know if that usage is necessarily all you want to look at, because Westbrook might be more efficient with his touches or with the ball in his hand.
But the thing is, Westbrook's not efficient with his touches. He needs a high volume for him to be worth
we can literally look at the standings where the Rockets are 6th and the Lakers and Clippers are 1st and 2nd. In fairness, the Rockets are pretty close to the
That's not the best way to measure dynamicism or synergy, in my opinion. But it's super important to see kind of like, the usage rates of previous seasons can indicate a pattern that can carry over, because I know it's for Russell Westbrook, he was a very inefficient player, but he was high in turnovers, but he's also really high in assists. So you got to choose. And it's as that rate goes down, he's forcing more plays and it doesn't become worth it at the end. But again, Thunder haven't done well in the playoffs, so maybe it would be a better fit with Houston.
I mean, the other thing I think is that I want to be clear. I'm not saying that Harden and Westbrook is close, in my opinion, to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard or to Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Just that I do think it is fair to say that they may be the third best duo in the NBA right now.
I think so.
No, I mean, yeah, we can just agree to disagree. Do you guys want to move on?
Yeah.
Sure. I guess the one other question I'd have about the NBA, if we want to talk about it, is so this is for next year. When they're healthy, how do you think Steph Curry and Klay Thompson would rank among these duos?
I mean, they always rank out well. Like, Splash Brothers can always
second behind LeBron and Davis.
All right, so let's move on to some football here. Some new guys, some old guys. Kind of new guys in a new team. You guys want to talk about Brady and Gronk relocating to Tampa Bay?
Not much to talk about. I mean, they're going to be really good as per usual, unless injuries can hurt them. I mean, let's be honest. I know this might sound crazy, but Bill Belichick, let me not disrespect Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is an amazing coach, but I think you can have a fair debate over if Bruce Arians is a better offensive coach. Bill Belichick's a way better overall coach.
Also, Ellis, you have to remember the coach doesn't make the players. Like, I know much respect to Belichick, but Brady and Gronk would be good without Belichick.
Yeah, but I'm saying they could possibly even be better without Bella. They can possibly be better. Yeah. Or the only thing stopping Brady and Gronk is Brady's oldness, but I'm not sure.
I'd hesitate on better without Belichick. I know Belichick's a defensive coach, but he's also the best coach of all time.
And Bruce
There's
Arians,
no way, assuming their play is the same, there's no way that you can leave the best coach of all time and get better.
I think his team is improving a lot.
Scheme, Jeremy.
He's getting so much around him. He's getting Mike Evans, Chris Godwin.
No, I disagree. Listen to what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the team itself can't be better, but assuming everything else is equal, there's no way that you can argue that Bruce Arians is a better coach in any way than Belichick.
I don't think that's the argument he's making, but
no, hold up. That is what I'm arguing. I'm arguing that not overall. That's not. I'm not arguing that Bruce Arians is a better overall coach. Belichick kills it. Offensive-minded, I think Bruce Arians is a better coach. And what do Brady and Gronk play? Offense. So that's what matters. They don't care about defense and overall coaching. Overall coaching is Belichick, of course. I'm not arguing that. Offensive-minded, Bruce Arians is a really, really good coach.
Well, I'd say two things. First of all, Bruce Arians is a really, really good coach, and I don't want to take anything away from him. Even though it was a 30-30 season, the fact they got Jameis Winston, of all people, to 30 touchdowns is still kind of crazy. But with that said, first of all, the defense does affect the offense in a big way, right? Because a better defense, the offense gets more chances, doesn't have to play from behind, all of that stuff. But even more than that, Belichick has had some really good offenses under Brady, right? Like, remember the Randy Moss season? They went, undefeated.
But again, that's Randy Moss.
No, they didn't. They lost to the Giants.
Okay, in the regular season, you know what I mean. But it's not like Belichick hasn't had his fair share of top offenses. I agree the last 2 or 3 years they've been a little bit lackluster, but I don't even know if 2 or 3 years. The last year.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's hard to argue with if we're talking about only specifically chemistry between two players. Brady and Gronk are going to have great.
Also, obviously, we all know Gronk hasn't played football recently, and we all know he's in insane shape. He's really athletic, but there's a difference between being in shape and being in football shape, and I'm not quite sure if he's 100% going to be ready for the constant hits and big
I'm way more
hits.
Worried. Gronk has injury problems.
Yeah, his back. We all know that. Yeah.
I'm way more worried about Brady and his oldness problem.
I think Gronk's more likely to get injured.
I think
last year. Oh, injured, yes, but I'm not sure for Brady. I've injured totally Gronk, but Brady knows how to keep his body in tip-top shape. But I'm not sure Brady will be able to reach Gronk as much as
I mean, that's one thing I think about this duo. Historically, they're obviously amazing. They're just really old.
Not Gronk, but Brady.
Gronk's not. Gronk's,
I think Gronk's 30, 31. I'll fact check that.
Yeah,
but if you consider the amount,
tight end.
And if you consider the amount of injuries he's taken as relative to a lot of other players that are playing as long as he has.
He's 31.
That's got to add at least another year or two onto his age.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely.
Injury time's a real thing.
So
but we can all kind of agree that they'll do just fine for the
So Jeremy,
Yes.
we all know you have a little person you called your Mahomie. Who's his duo?
My Mahomes duo is Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill. And
Jeremy, I thought you were gonna say yourself.
Oh, I mean that
Left it open. I left it open for you, Jeremy.
I mean that goes without saying. If we're talking State Farm, then it's got to be Aaron Rodgers. But anyway, I digress. That Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes, it's obviously very much more Patrick Mahomes being the best quarterback in the NFL, but they still together have to be one of the top duos because
Actually,
Tyreek Hill, he doesn't always get the respect he kind of deserved based on his play, but I do think he is like a top 10 receiver.
I think Tyreek Hill is a top 5. Okay. Tyreek Hill has had well-documented problems. He misses catches once in a while with his hands, but
And
in terms of
off
No.
the field, he's obviously suspect.
everyone,
Yes.
yeah, and obviously we're not.
But
We're not
focusing
talking
on
about
that.
that. No,
Very-
I'm not saying that at all.
He's
when I'm
very
talking about
suspect. But, I feel like he gets discredited a lot on the field for saying, he's very fast. That's all he's got for him. If you watch him run routes,
He's so
it's
precise.
insane.
Everything.
It's not even the speed. He just switches so
quickly.
quickly.
So quick.
and he's so good at getting open. So I feel like, of course, Patrick Mahomes, I think, is going to go next year is the best quarterback in the NFL. But, and this is a big but, Tyreek, part of that is because Tyreek Hill is a top 5 receiver in the NFL, assuming he doesn't get suspended again because,
Yeah, and with the ball in his hand with space, I don't know if there's a better player than Tyreek Hill.
Of course, exactly. That goes along with
that goes without saying. Yeah, just like
And it's interesting because, this is kind of going off, but let's go off on football.
That's fine.
It's gonna be interesting. Another dynamic duo for talking defensively is, and this is a really dynamic trio, but whatever. It's if the Ravens can get Jamal Adams because they've been rumored to get him.
Oh my God! Please no. As a Jets fan, let's pray for me, please.
That would be really unfortunate.
Him and oh my God, I'm blank. Earl Thomas. Sorry, yeah. Even Earl Thomas would be one insane hell of a dynamic duo.
Honestly, if the Ravens get Jamal Adams, assuming that Lamar Jackson doesn't get nervous in the playoffs like he has the past 2 years, just mail him the Super Bowl. Like, just do it.
Actually, I think that's part of the football.
It's interesting in football because it's not really the same as basketball that
or
you
baseball.
can really kind of get in each other's way as much because if you have 2 good players in basketball versus like 1 good player and a bunch of good role players, the case could be made for either, right? But in football, I think that you always want the better player because everyone plays a very specific role and that's super hyper specific. And
I mean, I do think there's a thing to scheming. Oh, go ahead, Alice.
Oh, I was just going to say, with your mail in the Super Bowl, I think the reason why you can't do that exactly is because
injuries.
The way football – that of course. But the way football is schemed is that it's a 1-game playoff. So, for example, last year, no one's arguing that the Titans were not a better team than the Ravens. But they still beat them in the playoffs because it's 1 game. You got to show up every game. So it's always still a little bit iffy. But, yes, the Ravens would be clear favorites.
You are absolutely right. But, I don't know. In my opinion, Jamal Adams is probably the best safety in the NFL.
But definitely top 5.
Who's better?
Who's better?
Just think. This is me as a Jets fan right now. The Jets organization is kind of like a tire fire. It just keeps on burning. It doesn't go out. So the fact that he's able to be debatably the best safety in an organization where he's
definitely up there in the top 5 for sure. I'm not sure if he's number 1. We
drafted him. One won't pay him. We let go of Robbie Anderson, our number 1 weapon, for nobody. And just poor Sam Darnold.
Here we go into a Jeremy rant here.
I'm just hoping Jamal Adams doesn't get traded to the Cowboys because that's been a rumor, and he would like.
Can't we just make up with him? Just give him a lot of money. Like he's worth whatever we pay him.
The Jets aren't that smart, Jeremy.
No, we're not.
They have the GPA of an Ellis Gordon.
Yeah, I agree.
Yo, hold up. Screw you guys, but
wow, great comeback.
That was mean comment.
Love you, Ellis.
Earl Thomas might be. Earl Thomas.
Derwin James.
Yeah. But no, definitely top 5.
I think they're good. I think Earl Thomas in his prime, yes. Right now, I don't think he's better than Jamal Adams.
All right. Want to move on to a more controversial dynamic duos
Sure,
from
let's hear about it.
more sport?
Let's do it.
Because, well, I think Jacob should argue this one because Jacob on our list put down MLB players as our dynamic duos, and I'm not entirely sure that you can consider MLB players a dynamic duo, but Jake, make your case.
All right, so I'm just going to say, in my opinion, I think you can't put baseball players on a list of dynamic duos if they're on the field at the same time and they benefit each other. I'm not a good debater, and these three all are, so I think they probably will out-debate me, but I'm still going to state my case. I think there's really one duo that stands out that's been good for like the last 5 years. It's going to be Carlos Correa and Jose Altuve, the trash can hitters, the Houston Trash Tros. I mean, there's nothing to say. The second baseman with Altuve, shortstop with Correa, they're one of the most consistent fielders. They're both fast. They both have power. They both hit for average. And I know you're going to say, like, oh, baseball players can't be a dynamic duo, but they're, like, one of the best second baseman and shortstop players in the game. And I stand by that. Go ahead.
First of all,
tear me apart.
I actually was going to defend you because I think based on what I said, my definition of dynamic duos are – baseball players can be a dynamic duo, right? What I say a dynamic duo is it's when you do something that specifically helps another player on that field, right? So if you get a home run, that specifically helps every other player because it makes their jobs easier, right? Like once you have the lead, if you're an outfielder, if you can catch a ball, right, you can be more relaxed and then you can give up a home run. If you're a pitcher and your team scores, right, then the pitcher has more leeway. So because of that, because having a player on your team do something good, even if it's not directly involving you in the play, actively helps other people on your team, I do think you can consider baseball dynamic duo.
Ellis, what do you think?
Yeah,
I'll let you have the first crack at it here.
So I've slightly changed my position before when we talked this right before the podcast.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair to call baseball players dynamic duo, but, and this is a big but, they're not the same. It's not the same definition of a dynamic duo as NBA or the NFL, and that's just come down to the nature of the game in that you need 9 players each. In basketball and football, especially basketball, but football too with quarterbacks and wide receivers, there's no denying. In football, certain positions are just better than others, and in basketball, every player holds more weight than in baseball. You can, hence why LeBron James can carry. It was pretty much a one-man team on the Cavaliers and got to the finals. Obviously, you want the better players, the better. But in baseball, for example, Barry Bonds was who everyone considers a top 5 player of all time, unless you count him out for steroids, which that's fair. Mm-hmm. But even so, he could never take his team. He could never win a title because that's the way baseball works. One player can't do a team. So it's a different dynamic in that you can have a dynamic duo, 2 players that are really good that complement each other. But Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are the nucleus of the team. They're the nucleus of that Clippers team. There's no denying that. They have a bunch of good role players.
Don't make fun of Ellis's GPA. He knows what nucleus means.
Ivan Zubac. They have a bunch of good players.
Yeah, they have good role players. Lou Williams.
Exactly, that's the point. You call them role players. But okay, here's how I phrase the
role players, but they're also all-stars. Like
here's how I phrased the question. No, they're not. Here's how I phrased the question.
They're good players.
You just called them good players, but your first initial reaction was role player.
It's because they're hidden behind.
Wait, Jacob, what's your first initial reaction with Alex Bregman?
He's a star.
Exactly.
I hate him with my heart.
That's not my point.
No, he's a star. He's an all-star.
And thus, I don't think it's the same dynamic duo because you have Altuve and Correa, but you also have Bregman, who's equally a star. So yeah, that's my case.
So as you all know, baseball and I have a contentious relationship. I'll remind the audience again that my great-grandpa was asked to play on the New York Yankees. He politely declined because good Jewish boys apparently don't play baseball. However, I'd like to remind the audience that baseball is a sport that's, like America, is based on individualism, not on a collective team, not on friendship. It's based on individualism. Ayn Rand would approve. However,
enough.
I think that's
We're not talking about Ayn Rand.
An appropriate analogy. The reason that baseball is America's pastime is because it is based, like capitalism, on the individual, not the system, not your friend, There's no dynamic duo or synergy in baseball. It's simply an individual going up against another individual. Yes, there's a team mentality involved, but no, it is not really a team sport. It is an individual sport. I know it's hard to believe. I've
Pitcher and
seen
catcher, easily. That's not an individual.
There you go. There you go. It's a pitcher throwing what the catcher wants. It's not. There's no relationship here.
Yes, there is. 100% there is. Yes, there is.
All right, wait. Can I argue something about the individual part? So sure. I think this is depending on what you consider the definition of dynamic duo. And I'm talking about this from the perspective of someone that has an individual sport, right? So even fencing. So on my fencing team, there's 3 other boys in my weapon, right? So there's 3 saber boys on the team that start. So what I'd say is we couldn't be a dynamic, or I guess trio, in that we work together on the, well, it's a strip, but we'll work together on the strip. But we are dynamic duo in the sense that in practice, right? We fence each other. If I make a mistake, they'll correct me. If they make a mistake, I'll correct them. And we help work to each other better. Like hitters in the MLB can do the same thing, right? Even if on the player, obviously when you're hitting, yes, it is an individual sport, but still 2 of them being on the same team, having a rapport can make both players better and thus be a dynamic duo, even if you don't actually actively see that on the field when you're playing.
Or your thing with the individuals, I could easily revoke that saying Mahomes and the Tyreek Hill is 2 individuals throwing to each other. Same thing.
No, because I see that's the only point I will concede to some degree is I do completely agree with you that catchers and pitchers can have a rapport. And I completely agree with that. But I think that's kind of the only time players interact. Other than throwing to each other.
There's a lot of interaction between the players.
I think it's a team interaction. It's not really a dynamic duo kind of interaction.
I see what Ori's saying. Because there's interaction.
I completely agree that pitchers and catchers can have a certain synergy, and I think that's important to note in baseball. But I really don't think that any other aspect of the game has a kind of rapport between 2 players.
Second base and shortstop, I think you can have.
But Ellis, that's very situational, and they're basically just throwing to each other. It's not like it's there's a clear goal in mind, and yes, it's like good that they have a goal or whatnot, but I kind of disagree that it's about that.
My argument still relays on the fact that dynamic duos are the center of a team, and dynamic duos in baseball
they don't have to be the center of the team, Ellis. I think they have to be 2 players that play well together.
I think they have to be in large sense. They have to be the center of the team to be a star dynamic duo. I think in baseball, often more they have to be the center of the team. Because I actually kind of think Ori's right. Not that players don't interact, but for me, if we're talking about a dynamic duo by interaction, there has to be a consistent interaction. And outside of pitcher and catcher, I don't really see that in baseball. It's not that people don't throw to each other, but it's not like consistently one player throws to the same player every time, right? Depends on who's running to what base.
Except for pitcher and catcher.
How about third batter and catcher? How about third batter and fourth batter batting back to back to each other?
Well, that's what I was saying. By they could be a dynamic duo, and they're absolutely affect each other. Like I was saying, you can practice together, and you can definitely make each other better. But it's not a dynamic duo in the sense that they are actually on the field together. The only thing I think that could be a by-field relationship dynamic duo is pitcher and catcher.
And I agree. I tend to agree with that. I think that's a good observation. All right. So, Jacob, you mentioned that your preferred dynamic duo was Jose Altuve and Carlos Correa.
Yeah. If I'm looking at baseball, just off the top of my head, yeah, that's who I thought of.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. Both great players. Obviously some controversy going on, but it is what it is.
And then also the Yankee coming out in me, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton.
That's a hitting dynamic duo, though.
Metro Boomers of New York City.
Metro Boomers.
Yeah.
No, but that's exactly my point. Where that's a hitting dynamic duo. So baseball.
Yeah, but I feel like they play off each other.
They do. So that's what I'm saying. Baseball dynamic duos, in my opinion, are still dynamic duos, but they function way differently than MLB.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yes.
And NFL and NBA.
Yeah, I guess if we were defining, I said you can be a dynamic duo, I think, in 2 ways then. One way is that you both have a rapport on your team and play well together, right? Like in basketball, passing, pitcher, catcher. In the NFL, quarterback, wide receiver, or like maybe 2 people on the defensive line. Or you can both be stars on your team and just be like friends and close and work well together off the field too, right? So like I think if there's two stars on a team, they can be a dynamic duo. So I think those are, in my opinion, two different ways to be a dynamic duo, but both are valid.
All right, so let's move on to some potential duos. These are kind of things in the future, kind of like upcoming young players or connections we can be clearly see made in the future, like Jeremy and Kate Upton. But I think that another one that we can think of, we can start talking about them right now. Jacob, you want to take it away?
Yeah, so I'm going to go to basketball first. I'll save my Giants for later. My favorite basketball player right now is Luka Doncic on the Dallas Mavericks. And I would think him and Porzingis, Kristaps Porzingis, the ex-Knick, cry. That was unfortunate to lose him, but they've already started to form their all-star duo after 1 or 2 years, but they have so much more potential, and I think they could eventually be compared to the Westbrook and Hardens or Kawhi and PG. Go ahead, Ellis.
But I think they'll be. I think they're different, right? They're
100%. They're different. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Murray. I was just gonna move on a little bit. Unless someone wants to. Do you want to talk about?
No, yeah. Go ahead.
Murray Hopkins, I think, can be an insane duo in the future. I really like Murray as a quarterback prospect, and everyone already knows what Hopkins can do. So
yeah, we all know he's all-star.
That could be insane.
Mittens are huge.
I mean, I think the last one I'll mention is I feel like you have to mention Kyrie KD. Honestly, personally, I don't think it'll necessarily work out just because I think they're both very odd personalities, and I'm not sure they'll mesh together so well. But I feel like you cannot not mention that when you're talking about dynamic duos in the future.
Shout out to Kyrie. He lives out in our town. So
it's very close to our town. And then one more duo to just wrap up our episode of duos. I might be a little biased, but I totally see the potential. Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley.
Yes.
You guys all know my love for Saquon Barkley. My confessed love might be a little obsessive.
A little bit.
But I think everything that Jones showed in his rookie year really shows a lot of potential. And I think the Giants this year, through the draft and through free agency, even though they did absolutely nothing in free agency, but through the offseason, they really gave Jones and Saquon the weapons to really be good. I mean, they buffed up their offensive line. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't know.
I think Jones and Saquon are going to be very good together. It might not be this year. It might be in 3 years, but I think they have the potential to be great.
I think long-term they'll be good. I think this year they will not be just because they already have a lot of –
we all know they'll be better than Sam Darnold and Le'Veon Bell.
I actually disagree, and here's why. Because first of all, I think Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones are very comparable at this point in their career. Long-term, we really don't know yet who's going to be better. With that said, I think it's just – this year will be a year where veterans thrive more. So because they've had more off-season, right? The Giants with Joe Judge are having a whole new system. Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley are still pretty young, especially Daniel Jones. So I just think this year, I actually do think Sam Darnold and Le'Veon Bell will have a better connection, just because Le'Veon Bell is more experienced.
I think that's fair. I'm going to shout out one more dynamic duo. This one goes out to my boy Jacob Kasdan. Me and him pretty much in every sport we ever play.
Yes, sir. Unstoppable.
Jewish chemistry, as we call it. Ellis and Jeremy have both seen it in action. It is
very hard to stop.
It's a little bit telepathic. It's very good. Doesn't matter if it's soccer, football, basketball.
Any sport, football.
Frisbee, whatever it is. We generally seem to complement each other very well. Jacob with his insane hand-eye coordination and me with pretty much everything else. So just shout out to my boy Jacob Kasdan.
Yes, sir.
Anything else to say?
Wacky sport.
All right, let's introduce our wacky sport of the week. So this week's wacky sport of the week is the Mr. Ugly competition. What is that, you might ask? What takes place in Zimbabwe every single year.
It took place in Ellis's basement.
I knew a joke was like that about to happen, but I was just about to say none of us could qualify as young, handsome individuals. Anyway, it's a beauty pageant in the small Zimbabwe town of Beitbridge, and it started in like the early 2000s, but gained a lot of popularity in 2012. They made it actually a national sport, and then the contest removed the stigma of ugliness because, end quote, looks are God-given. We should all be proud of who we are. So that's our Wacky Sport of the Week. Be proud of who you are. The competition has grown from 5 to 36 people, and apparently I'm reading here there's a reigning champion every year that wins. William Mass-Venus. If you want to search him up, apparently he's
how do I spell that?
Mr. Ugly. That is all for this week. Once again, thanks for tuning in like you always do. We appreciate it very much. Check out the podcast on all podcast apps.
Except Google Podcasts.
It will be on Google Podcasts by the time this comes, maybe.
Cap. 3. You said that 3 episodes in a row.
Also check out our YouTube channel. Thanks to Mr. Jeremy Giles over here. We're also always been simming some 2K13. We're gonna put up there if you guys want to watch that. As always,
everyone stay safe. Have a good 4th of July weekend.
Yes.
Don't be stupid.
Have a good. Hey, stay safe. Have an awesome week. Hope you enjoy.
Peace
out.
Goodbye.
Oh, check out our Instagram, Watt Podcast 1. Okay, got it.
Hey, Jeremy, what does Watt mean?
Watt stands for who's on top, as I've recently learned.
Wait, real quick. I forgot. Check out Instagram at Watt Podcast. No, it's Watt. Check out our Instagram at Watt.podcast. Check out our Twitter at Watt Podcast 1. Stay safe. Have a good week.
Goodbye.
Hope you enjoy. Goodbye.
Peace out.